Now you're listening to Fantastic Formosa with Joh Abrams in Taipei. Welcome back to Fantastic Formosa with Joh Abrams. This is actually a second segment with Keith Perron about how to create your own podcast, and we have 10 points that we wanted to cover and try to talk about how to create the best podcast or radio program. So let's go back over the first 5, okay, Keith? And welcome back, Keith. One was the concept and idea of a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be too over-ambitious. What's ambitious mean?
Keep it simple.
Okay. It's like KISS. KISS.
Mm-hmm.
Kiss me. It's like keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep it simple, stupid. Keep the concept simple. Yeah, don't go crazy, right? What are some other examples you think of?
Well, there's you mean the
idea of keeping something simple.
Do some research,
right?
And create. You can use the research to create something.
Mm-hmm.
Like we mentioned the last time we were here a week ago. Points 1, 2, and 3 you can kind of combine together.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have that, work on a pilot, a sample show.
Right.
Try to make a rundown, meaning before you start recording, have an idea what you're going to do, have an idea of what you're going to say. You don't have to script it word per word. If you're comfortable enough to ad lib, to make it up as you go along,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to do that, but at least keep some bullet points so you can keep on track with what you're saying.
Bullet points,
Yeah.
Good. Something I do not do on my podcast, unfortunately. I am extremely naive and stupid and lazy and ambitious.
Good combination. Good
I
combination.
have dreams, but I have no common sense about doing basic research. In the beginning, I did a lot of technical research. What kind of microphone I should use, what kind of camera I should use, the lighting. The lighting was always a problem, and
You were focused on the wrong things.
Was focusing. Maybe I should have got some makeup and a clown outfit, or
This is and at the last point here, and I can elaborate on that. We didn't do the last time.
We'll do it.
Right, like point 5. If you have a pilot,
Mm-hmm.
fine tune it. Find a friend or a couple of friends to listen to it. Get their feedback. Right. Now, going through these 5 points, you just mentioned something that's quite interesting, and I said you were focused on the wrong things. This is sort of like people will think, well, I want to do carpentry, so I'm going to buy the most expensive tools in the world. It's not going to make you a good carpenter. You want to start playing golf. People will go and buy the most expensive golf clubs in the world. It's not going to make you a good golfer.
Right.
Having the most expensive and looking for every bit of technical equipment is not going to make you a good podcaster or a good broadcaster. That should be secondary. The first part should be always, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? What's going to make me stand out? Then, when you have all that, then don't spend too much. It's very simple. Very simple. Excuse me, very simple. Then from there, if you feel the need, then you can get into the lighting and what kind of video camera, what kind of microphones, and so on and so on and so on. This is what I'm saying, because people will have a tendency, if they're focused, let's say, on the technical aspect, to get overly ambitious. And then the whole idea and concept and subject will be kind of secondary. You kind of want to reverse that because it doesn't matter how good you sound and how good you look on camera, but if the content is no good, it doesn't matter.
Agreed.
And if the content is strong enough and can hold itself, it doesn't matter if there's a few little technical glitches here and there. So, for example, before we move on to number 6. I will still do. I mean, there was a time when it was very common. If you're interviewing people, this is before Zoom, before Google Meet, that you would use the telephone.
Of course. Yeah.
I still use the telephone in some cases.
You mean a hard line?
Hard line.
Okay.
Because a mobile is unstable.
Right.
And the audio will be bad. But if I know somebody is going to be close to a landline, I will do it by landline. Because sometimes you don't know who you're interviewing. You don't know if they're technically savvy at the other end, or they're going to say, I don't know why. I'm not getting a picture. I'm not getting audio. I can't hear. I'll call you up on the phone. It's easier.
Right.
And if it's a good interview, it's not going to matter. People are not going to notice that it's phone quality. And phone quality is fine. It is fine. It's been done since the 1930s. You know, and it's still done today occasionally. Sometimes you'll hear foreign correspondents in a country where maybe there's no mobile signal, maybe the internet is down, and they're using the phone.
Right. Okay.
Now, remember last week, we kind of a teaser said a double ender.
Yeah.
Sounds a bit naughty, but actually, no, it isn't. A double ender is something that actually is quite common. Less so now because of the way the technology has changed.
Right.
But, for example, a double ender would be, and this I did many, many times before. So, for example, when I was living in Cuba, right, if I had to do a question and answer with somebody at a studio in the Netherlands, now the Cuban phone lines were rubbish. The sound was really bad. So in Havana, I had with me a Sony TCM 5000 professional tape recorder. I would speak to the person on the phone. I would be recording my voice in Cuba. I'd bring the tape to the embassy. They would send it through the diplomatic bag. And then with the other tape recorded in Hilversum, they would splice it together. So it sounded like we were using a very high quality satellite line. Not uncommon. Even through, I mean, even lately, sometimes they still do it with TV news reporting. If there's a satellite problem, correspondent, they will use their phone as the camera, send the file, and then quickly edit it together so it looks like they have a satellite link. That's called a double ender. A double ender is recording at both ends and then synchronizing it together like one conversation. And it's good to do because you can control the variables. For example, if the internet becomes unstable, the audio can become garbled.
Okay.
If somebody is using their computer to speak to somebody, unless they have a designated microphone, the microphone on the computer and laptop is always going to sound bad. But if they have a separate recording device with a better microphone, it could end up sounding like you're in the same studio. I remember once doing a question and answer with somebody, and we were supposed to be sitting in a studio just like how you and I are right now.
Right.
And the person that was going to do the interview lost their voice and couldn't make it. So the producer said to me, I will read the questions. You pretend you're talking to the host, which is exactly what I did. The week later, the host came in, acted his questions out, and they spliced it together. And it sounded like we were literally in the same room at the same time, and it was like a week apart.
Now, a lot of people would say that's fake news.
No, but this is common practice going even back to the 1930s and the early days of radio.
But the idea of feeding your guests the questions before you interview somebody.
Well, no, feeding the questions, because they had to write up questions because I didn't have enough time to come back a week later.
Right, of course.
So they had to come up with questions that he would ask, the questions that he was going to ask. So I answered them, and then he just added his voice mixed with mine.
A lot of people in the U.S. Notice this now, that people are doing these sort of things. It seems to be unfair. The answers are too quick and too ready and too perfect.
No, but that has to do with a lot of sharp editing.
Okay.
I mean, if we take something like the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
The old 1960s and 70s.
This is before satellite.
Right.
This is before they had new ENG, modern electronic video cameras to go out and cover, let's say, Vietnam. They were still using 16 millimeter film.
Right.
And what they would do is, let's say Dan Rather was in Vietnam covering gunfights that were going on. He would be connected in Vietnam. Dan Rather would be connected with Walter Cronkite in New York by a telephone, sometimes also by ham radio.
Really?
Ham radio signal, just so they can speak to each other. In New York, Walter Cronkite would be sitting in front of the camera, speaking to the camera, and Dan Rather, who's in Vietnam. In Vietnam, in front of Dan Rather, was a 16 millimeter camera, director, cameraman, lighting, no lighting, sound. They would record everything, then send the can of film and the tape by a special courier. It was usually in New York 24 hours later. And then on the CBS Evening News, Walter Cronkite says, I spoke to our correspondent. Earlier, we had this conversation with Dan Rather, and they would edit it together. You could tell that Dan Rather was on film, but they were actually having it was the real conversation, just delayed.
Okay. Interesting. All right. I didn't know they
Very, very common practice. Very common practice. And broadcasters were doing that even as far... Edward R. Murrow was doing that in the 1950s.
Oh, in the 50s. Okay. He's famous for the World War II broadcasts.
There's a program that he did with Jackie Kennedy, the wife of John F. Kennedy.
Right.
And that's actually how they did it. They couldn't link up Jackie Kennedy's living room and his studio, but they were speaking by telephone, recording it separately. And this is in the days when videotape was not electronically edited, but you physically had to cut the videotape and splice it together. It was a technical feat, and it pulled off. It seemed like they were speaking completely live at the time. Not uncommon at all.
Wow, those were the days when you had to actually cut into tape. It's hard to believe. The issue regarding microphones was a big problem during my last podcast because I thought I designated the wrong microphone. It was a snowball. Are you familiar with the snowballs? Yep. Great microphones, but I had not turned it on. So I obviously, but it was a great podcast. I think people really enjoyed it.
You see, you could have actually gone back and just re-recorded your parts.
I really didn't have much to say, actually. I was really, the host was so amazing and interesting. They sort of dominated the conversation. And I said, fine, that's why I would cut in occasionally. And you can still hear it, but it's not the quality that I wanted. And didn't realize that till later. Another thing that annoys me is the wireless connection sometimes fade. That's very annoying.
Always use hardwire. Always use hardwire. How do you
wire that into your computer, though?
Ethernet connection.
Oh, okay.
I personally myself do not like using the Wi-Fi. I always prefer an Ethernet. An Ethernet connection will always be much better than a wireless connection in this way.
Yeah, I'm kind of ashamed of my last podcast, even though it was brilliant on his part. And I did not cut it up into 3 sections like you had recommended. I went ahead and ran it at 40 minutes, which is probably too long. I don't know.
The really reason why I suggested 3 segments, right, is when you're editing the 3 segments, so part 1, find a cliffhanger for part 1.
Cliffhanger. What's a cliffhanger for?
A cliffhanger is like a kind of a teaser of what's coming up, right?
Yes.
Or you can even do it like, you can also say, that's the end of part 1. Here's a small little snippet of part 2, just 10 seconds. We'll see you next week.
Then you have to go in and edit that. Yeah. Okay.
And you'll find it's a little bit more engaging instead of all the way through. And because of people's short attention spans today, that also has a lot to do with it. Because some people will see 40 minutes and go, no, I'm not going to even try.
Twitter has destroyed the 40 character Twitter accounts now, and the acronyms people use on their phones. I don't even understand half the acronyms I get.
Well, I mean, just to give you an example of how much it's changed, right?
Right.
When I was working in radio, if I was doing a story, when I started, my stories were 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes, right? I can use sound bites, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, sometimes even a minute. Today, if I was doing the same story, the story would be 1 minute, my sound bites would be 5 seconds. So people's attention spans have fallen. The problem with that is that I don't think that's good journalism. There are still some examples today where there's some podcasts that still, I prefer myself long form. I have no problem with listening to long form news. There's a one podcast. It's a news program. It's produced out of the UK. And it's a news type radio magazine. And they're doing the kind of thing where, for example, if we take, say, commercial news, that was, say, 30 minutes, right? It used to be 27 minutes, 3 minutes of commercials. Today, that 27 minutes is now 21 minutes, 9 minutes of commercials.
Oh my God.
Stories went from maybe 3 to 5 minutes down to 1 minute 30, sometimes less, and then ending with somebody's dog swimming in a swimming pool. There, however, are still newscasts today that do long form news.
Right.
The two that I can think of right away would be the PBS NewsHour from PBS.
Right.
They have 10 minutes of news. And then for the next 50 minutes, they'll focus sometimes 20 minutes on one story.
Yes. Yeah.
Channel 4 News in the UK do the same thing. Whereas a commercial newscast from ITV in 30 minutes will have maybe 15 stories. Channel 4 sometimes 1, sometimes 2 stories.
Okay, Channel 4 is a pretty famous one that people watch. There was a very famous interview with Jordan Peterson and a woman, and she just destroyed her career, I think.
No. She's still there.
She's still there, but it was fairly obvious that she was not in charge.
Well, no. She was asking. Just again, I always tell people, if you're a public figure and you're going to be asked questions, to me, there's no such thing as an unfair question.
Right.
You just put yourself in that position.
Right.
Get used to it.
But he said that there were cameras on wires, and she would ask a pointed question, and the camera would just slide right down into his face and scare him a little bit.
Well, no, you have the director in the gallery
Right.
and the producer, who are also looking up information, telling in the earpiece. The director, of course, is going to do that. That's television news.
Right. Okay.
That's quite common.
I'm not sure how it works, but one of the most controversial interviews ever. At least today, I think. Let's see. Okay, well, the double ender. So we're going to go to 0.6, right?
Yeah.
All right. No?
Of course, 0.6. Talking about pilots before.
We talked about a second pilot.
Second, if you feel that it's needed, do a second pilot.
Just in case the first one doesn't.
In case the first one is complete rubbish. And then do a second one. And then sometimes listen to them both back and back. And then you may find the first one is actually good. I'm going to use that as my model.
Right.
And then if it's not good, you go, I'm going to use the second one.
Well, I did that during my first interview, and it was a disaster. I'm the host, what am I talking about? And my guest decided to do it in a busy coffee shop. It was too loud, and I couldn't understand anything they were saying, as you pointed out. So I just had to delete it, and hoping the guest would not become angry because they spent an hour talking. How do you handle that problem? Because you don't realize it till you get to the editing stage and realize this guy is, I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, myself, if it was, I like doing location interviews. I like to have that background sound. It's lively. It feels dynamic. But you need a microphone for it. You need the proper microphone.
He was using the earphones. The earphones.
No, don't use those. Those are no good. You need a proper microphone so it's in front of the person. It's picking up ambience noise, which is always good, but it's picking up that person.
Okay, but the earphones are good for listening, but not speaking.
Use it just for monitoring.
Right.
Just to
okay,
monitor.
Right.
Use a
right.
proper microphone. I know that some people will use like the earbuds when doing interviews and all this stuff. And I will just not go near it. If I look at the microphones that I have at home, two of them are the same Neumann microphones that we're using here. I have a Shure microphone, two Neumann microphones, and my headphones are gigantic.
Oh, really?
I don't like the earbuds. They're proper ones that seal out all the noise. So if I'm in a location, they look like I'm wearing a space helmet, but I can hear every little sound that the microphone is picking up.
Now, on that issue, my concern is the echo you get if your speaker is on and your microphone is on at the same time.
Turn the speaker off.
Okay, and
That's simple.
Go through the ear.
Use the earphone.
Earphones.
Never. I do not like to monitor. Well, okay, it depends. If I'm doing an interview or I'm presenting a program, I'm not going to monitor out of the speaker. You know, there's a reason why when people do live call-in shows, you would hear things like, "Oh, can you turn your radio off down over there?" You know. Use the headphones. That's what headphones are for.
Yeah.
You can pick out all the little sounds. But I love doing location interviews, either for video or for audio, because they sound more lively, they sound more dynamic. And if there's,
you gotta use a real microphone.
You have to use a real microphone. Don't buy these like the most expensive equipment that you buy, right? If you're starting your podcast, I'll tell you right now, headphones, okay, yes. Microphone.
So what do you think about the Snowball?
Snowball is good when you're starting out. Mm-hmm. It's a good practice microphone to get used to it. Right. But myself, I would not use that. But I think if you're starting off, that's a good way to go. Right. Like I said, the two microphones that I use are same kind of. I mean, this studio that we're in, these Neumann microphones, I have the same kind of arms. But the only difference is that I don't have them bolted like they are here onto the table. I have rubber mounts, so if you hit the table, the microphone, doesn't shake. Yeah, it doesn't shake. It doesn't pick up any noise.
And these have the little foam thing on them, and these rubber band. What do you call these things?
Well, these microphones here, these Neumanns, there's the pea popper. If you take it off, just so the pa pee pa. Noise.
Right. That's the foam, right?
The foam, yeah. Or we have another name for it, but I can't say it here.
Okay.
And basically, the springs that are holding the microphone in the center of the mount is just to prevent shaking and vibration.
Right.
But the thing is, because this arm is bolted right on the table, you're still going to get some of that.
Some of the vibration, for example, if I slap the table or knock the table with my knees or something. But I was real happy because I do mine at home, and my children were, even though I told them I was doing a podcast, I needed silence. They got into a screaming fight with my wife. And since my microphone was set in a certain way, it didn't pick it up. It was very just my voice. So I was pretty happy in the second interview, even though they were killing each other.
Well, even 10 for example, like I always tell people, if you're starting a podcast, the sound is very important, right? And I have been in situations before where I had to record stuff. I remember once in one location I was at, and I had the equipment, but the room was in certainly no way set up to record. It was too big. It was made of cement. The acoustics were terrible.
All right. What about acoustics? Because in this room we have soundproofing.
Well, it's not soundproofing.
What is it?
It's kind of it's not exactly what I would call a dead room. There's still a little bit of echo. I can still hear it, but it reduces it a lot.
All right.
But I remember in one circumstance I had to file a few stories, and the sound in this hotel was it was just diabolical. And I needed to find a better way to record the sound. I'm not kidding, I took apart the bed.
Excuse me?
I took apart the bed, the mattress and the box spring. I laid them side by side in a kind of an L shape on the floor. I used the pillows and the blankets to cover it like a cave. And I set the microphone up inside just to get a good sound.
Now, of course, the hotel didn't know this.
Well, the maids came in with the cleaner. Why is the bed? They couldn't understand. I said, the room is too noisy, and I had a window that was outside in the street. With too much, the windows were not soundproof.
Right.
I mean, I've done the things I've done in hotel rooms to get good sound.
Right.
I've taken apart telephones in hotel rooms to
wow.
feed stories.
All right.
I used to
As long as they
travel.
don't know, I guess.
Used to travel with a small screwdriver kit. That if I had to take apart a telephone to
like
feed a story,
spy or something.
well, I would take apart the telephone, use alligator clips to feed direct audio into the phone.
That's brilliant. See, this is a man that you don't mess with. He could work for the CIA or radio.
Maybe I do. No, I'm kidding.
No.
But anyway,
no
sound
way.
is very important.
Yes, that's what I was asking you, because my room, I think I got it set up in such a way that there's not a lot of echo. So anyway, how about back, behind you?
Yeah.
What is that called? The backspace where the camera sees something in the back. Green screen.
You can use a green screen. I mean, that depends on the person. That really depends
Right.
on the person.
I had one I tried to use. It showed me deep in a military bunker somewhere, and it didn't really.
No, because the thing is, you need a proper green screen, which is
Right.
getting a proper green piece of cloth, hanging it up,
Right.
making sure there's no wrinkles in it, and then
Yes.
superimposing a picture, and then it'll be fine.
I tried that. It was impossible. And then I even tried painting the wall.
No, you
Nope,
need
nope.
need a piece of cloth, and you have to have proper lighting as well.
Exactly. Forget it.
Yeah, don't bother.
My wife thought I was insane. She tore it all down. It didn't work anyway. So I still have green furniture. I spray painted some of my chairs and tables green so that it wouldn't. But what do you call that? A backdrop?
Backdrop, yeah.
All right. Now on mine, since I have a big wall and I have patches from the military on there.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really see them very well, so I have to adjust my desk to pull it forward so that my face and the patches are visible. And I think it makes an interesting backdrop. Is that important in a podcast?
Not really. I mean, that's like the fluff of the whole thing. It really depends.
What I don't like.
I mean, nobody's going to sit there and go, "Oh, look at that! I see a picture on the." Nobody's going to do that.
No, but I'm a kind of a curious guy. But one thing I despise is the bookshelf in the back, because I just feel like, come on, you didn't read those books. You're too stupid. I just think, no way. Listening to this guy talking, he didn't read Aristotle. I can see Aristotle in the back. They bought these books and put them up there
with decoration.
With the decoration.
It's just decorating a set.
Read
Yeah.
Aristotle. So yeah, I hate bookshelves. I really do. And they put these little things on there. The worst ones, of course, are the Star Trek ones, where they put every Star Trek character in the backdrop and little dolls and, all that silly stuff. But anyway, okay, backdrop doesn't matter, I guess. But lighting is very important.
Depends as well. I mean, depends what kind of podcast you're going to do. Is it audio or video? If it's audio, it's not important. If it's video, it's more important.
Yeah, I get reflections in my glasses, which are very annoying.
Well, then you have to wear camera glasses.
What?
You know what camera glasses are?
Glasses? No.
If you watch any movie or a TV show where there's somebody wearing glasses, they're actually only wearing the rims. There's no lenses.
So I have to get an old pair
Or
of
you
glasses.
have to adjust the lighting a certain way, but then not move, because if you move, then it'll reflect.
Yeah.
But again, that's not important. Nobody really...
Oh, you should have. I had to wait 20 minutes for an interview once for a TV news outlet. I won't say who it was, but they set up where I'm supposed to set exactly. Don't move from that spot. I put down a little tape down at the chair, and then I did move the camera a little bit to center myself, and then they came back on. And he says, "What did you do?" They were so angry.
No, you don't move anything.
Well, I'm sitting there. It's hot. I'm sweating. It was 20 minutes waiting. I just like, oh my God, what are you asking me to do here? They were angry at me, and they're not paying me anything. I don't know. But anyway, Number 7. Dun, dun. Think of what distribution platform. What's a platform?
Well, platform would be, let's say, a service like Substack or others.
Or Patreon.
There's many to choose from, and each of them have their positives and negatives.
Right.
But I always say that if you're going to be starting off, right, don't just use one, use many. See which one you get a better response from, and if there's one you get a better response from than the others, then you stick with that one. But it doesn't cost anything anyway, so you can continue using all of them to have just a wider distribution.
All right.
And again, each platform will attract a different type of audience. So that really also depends on your audience and who you want to attract. If you're going to do something on, I don't know, cooking from the Middle Ages, right? As an example, and there are podcasts about that.
Cooking from the Middle Ages.
There's quite a few podcasts on that. Quite interesting.
Here is the dog.
No, I enjoy them. I find them really fascinating. But for example, they're going to use YouTube. They're not going to use Discord or Twitch, which is for a more younger audience.
Twitch. Now, that was one I had no idea about. I really did.
Yeah.
I was so confused.
It's just another platform.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
But it might be good. I don't know. Check it out, folks.
Predominantly younger.
Hip.
I wouldn't say hip, but just a very different demographic. Just a very different demographic.
We're old men now.
Yeah.
We can admit it. Each platform has positive and negative. Okay, we talked about that. Point 8. Think of a name. A name is important. You have to have a name, I guess, because it will make it difficult or easy to find unless you're a known personality, a famous person. Don't put your name in the title. This will come across as ego trip. What's an ego trip?
Well, an ego trip is somebody who thinks they're better than what they actually are.
Like me.
I think Kruger-Dunning effect.
I'm like, famous. Don't talk to me.
But again, this number 8. This really depends, right?
All right.
If you are a well-known personality, of course, put your name in it.
Well,
it's called the Joe Rogan Experience because it's Joe Rogan. He's not going to call it, microphone in the beer, for example.
Well, some people have, actually. I've seen some stuff like that.
But, that really all depends.
One's called Whiskey and Cigars.
Whiskey and Cigars, from Australia, I think.
I'm not sure, but I watch it sometimes. I go, I want a whiskey and cigar.
But you see, the problem with this is that, and this is something that I have seen. In the first part, last week, I was telling you how, 16 years ago, there were, so many podcasts appearing, right? People that never heard worked in radio and have never done podcasts, and they were calling it after their name. And they were thinking, I'm going to become a celebrity because of blah, blah, blah. Right. It was not going to happen already.
Right,
it's just not going to happen
right.
unless you're well known, unless you have a name for yourself. Don't do it because sometimes that will turn people off.
Okay. So you should maybe think about using what we call a pen name or a fake name. Is that an idea?
No. Terrible name, and I'll tell you why.
Why?
You can find out who the real person is right away.
Well, let's just say that it's just for fun.
If it's just for fun, you'll lose credibility.
Really?
Unless you're not, unless it's a pen name that you've been using for years, unless you have a social media presence with that name. Otherwise, don't do it. It'll just make you look ridiculous.
Well, I use one. I don't know. My podcast.
Actually,
I use my real name, and I use a little bit of what we call call sign, which is a military, Maverick from the movie. It's my old call sign, so just for fun. I don't know why it has to be so serious.
Like I said, if somebody really wants to do it, to actually make something for themselves. I've seen this happen before, where somebody started a podcast and they used a nom de plume, pen name,
fake name, pen name, whatever.
And then it was like they started to get an audience. Started to get an audience, and people were like, "Wait a second, this sounds like that person does not exist."
Okay.
And then doing a bit of research, saying, "Wait a second, this is Bob Smithers, and in Louisville, Kentucky, or Venezuela, whatever it is." So that's it. Then what happened is they lost all credibility, and it flopped.
All right, but you also don't want, I don't know, a little bit of charm in your name maybe might help. I don't know.
No, but then I think it's a little bit silly.
Okay.
But that's me. I mean, in radio programs that I've done before, right? Mm-hmm. I've given out my home phone number, even my address, my home address, on the air.
That's kind of dangerous, isn't it?
What's the worst that can happen? When at Radio Netherlands, I used to say, "Oh, if you want to reach me here in the office, or just come by my home in Hilversum, this is my street." And it's funny, never once.
Nobody.
They
don't believe you. That's
nobody ever came by. Only once, where I was on newsroom duty that day, and somebody, the receptionist, she said, "Keith, there's somebody to the family here that said they visited your home, but you're not home, so you must be here at Radio Netherlands." Anyway, I went to they had heard me mention like 2 weeks before or whatever. Anyway, we went out to lunch, had a great time.
Just one time, huh?
It was one time, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, let's
I've never, yes, there are a lot of crazy people out there.
See, that's what I'm worried about.
But I can't think about that. I really cannot think that everybody out there is crazy. Not everybody out there is crazy. I can't think about that.
Are not this program, my other podcast program. I get some really angry mail. What do you do about angry mail?
I never read it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Okay. I mean, no. I've never, this is one thing I should mention, right? Is when you're starting a podcast, there's people who are going to love you, and there's people who are going to hate you. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing you can do is just don't even read any of it. Don't even read any of it.
I used to get upset. This is 10 years ago when I used to be a journalist, and I would get angry.
I can't be bothered. I mean, one time...
Angry, even threatening.
Yeah. The American commentator and comedian Bill Maher has said many times, he said, "I never check out what they say about me on Twitter or any social media because I don't care."
There should be somebody vetting this stuff, looking at it for you, just to make sure.
You just don't know. You don't want to know anyway.
Maybe they should say, security people should say, "Look, we think maybe this one little message might be a problem." Okay, all right. So the name is not important. It just has to be honest.
And also, a title. If you come up with a show name, something that the algorithm picks up and will spread out to everybody. That's really very important, because sometimes you can have a show title, right? That to you sounds good, but to the algorithms and search engines is not going to get the word out there. That's also very important.
All
as well.
right. Yeah, I noticed.
Keywords.
Is it that you think that it should be shorter or longer?
Well, that doesn't make any difference. It's just that it has to be something that search engines, right, or the algorithm, like we talked about before, or the AI systems that are now in place will start pushing. I mean, for example, if you just give you two examples. So let's say you're gonna start a cooking show, right?
I'm not.
And we'll call it Wendell's Kitchen. Okay.
All right.
Wendell's Kitchen is not going to have any impact, but if you call it Wendell's Cooking Disaster, that will have more of an impact.
Yeah. I get
it.
You
see what I mean?
Get it. Bob's Cooking Disaster, or something really funny. Okay.
But that's very subjective, and some people have different views on that than mine. But
yeah. Okay. Yeah. We have. Let's see here. What else is next? Number 9 and then 10. Once you have all this, use X, Twitter, I guess. Mm-hmm. IG, what's IG?
Instagram.
Oh, and FB, which is Facebook. Mm-hmm. Twitch and other platforms to get the word out about your program. So I use X, but I don't use, I do use LinkedIn, and I do use FB.
LinkedIn from the past, forget it.
No, not anymore?
No, not anymore. It's a very older, I mean, like with the podcast that you're doing, right? Try to use as many as possible. And before you release the full program, kind of like a 10-second excerpt or 15-second excerpt, and just put it everywhere for a week.
Well, I use the Facebook groups that I'm a member of to put many of my items because they're niche groups. So depending on what I talk about that week or write about that week, I'll put it in that particular specialization.
Yeah, well, that's actually very good. But before you release the program, just put like a 20-second clip as a teaser.
Okay.
And then at the bottom, like the date that you can download it from.
Interesting. Okay, good. Now Twitch, you I guess you use it.
I use Twitch, yeah.
All right. I have never heard of it. What's it about?
Okay, Twitch is just another social media platform. I use it for motorcycle stuff.
Okay.
Because a lot of racing stuff on there. That's what I use it for.
Twitch.
Yeah.
I'm going to check it out and see what's going on.
Twitch's audience and demographic is like 13 to 22, 23.
I don't think that's my area.
Yeah. I mean, so if you're doing something that's young and hip and like motorcycle racing like I do, right? Yeah, it's a good place.
Yeah, this might be your last program, the way you drive your bike. Point 10, this is our last point, and we have about 5 minutes left. Let's get to it. If the pilot is good enough, you can use that for the first program. If it isn't, then name the first program, upload it to the platform you will use for distribution, and that's it. Now, wait a minute. It's not the first program, or
if you're doing a pilot,
right?
And like I said, we talked about earlier, like you want to work out all the kinks, right? So you do a pilot, you worked out all the kinks, and you go, hey, this pilot is good. I'm going to use this as the first show. Then use it as the first show.
Okay. If not,
then do another pilot, and that you know.
And do you use that original pilot for anything?
Oh, the original pilot, if it's no good, just throw it away.
Well, you've interviewed somebody who took time out for their day to spend an hour or two with
then just use the interview in it and edit. You know, I'm very much for if I'm interviewing somebody, my primary goal is to make the other person sound good. That is my primary goal. And I may dislike them, I may really hate them,
like
but
me.
I still want them to sound good. I still want them to sound good.
Sure. You don't certainly want to humiliate them or make them feel uncomfortable because this might be their first time.
No, it's not just that.
Oh, okay.
It's not just that. But if you do that, you will then get a reputation where nobody will want to come on your program.
Oh, Lord. Yes.
You see what I mean? So, I mean, I have interviewed people who I've really hated, like passionately hated. But I enjoyed speaking to them. And then realized during the interview, actually, I kind of like them because I now had a serious talk with them. I could understand their point of view, and we kind of got along. Some people I didn't get along with, but I still enjoyed the interview.
They have these gotcha questions. I got you questions sometimes.
Yeah, I will ask got you questions.
Yeah.
But, you know, if somebody is a public figure and they're going in for an interview, just expect that kind of question and don't cry and whine about it.
Why not just ignore it since it's been publicized elsewhere for
Well,
so
if you
long?
ignore it, then the person listening will think that this person has something to hide, right?
But you interviewed the fifth Beatle, we call him.
Yeah, Sir George Martin.
You never mentioned the Beatles throughout the program. You talked about everything but the Beatles.
Everything but the Beatles.
Now, that's fascinating. See, that's a program I want to listen to. I'm not interested in hearing any more about the Beatles.
Well, it's how that actually came about. I was doing a 12-part series on comedy, and one of the comedians that I was focusing on, comedic actors, was Peter Sellers. And I knew that Sir George Martin had produced Peter Sellers' recordings that he made in the 50s and 60s, and even some of the recordings that became hits, like the one with Sophia Loren called "Goodness Gracious Me." So I called up. This is in 1993, 1992. I called up Air Studios, which is the studios that he owned. Spoke to his manager, and I said, "Listen," and I said, "You don't know who I am. I want to interview Sir George Martin if he has time, not very long, 10, 15 minutes." Right away, on the phone, before I can even say anything, she said, "No, he's not doing any more interviews anymore. He doesn't want to talk about the Beatles anymore." And I said, whoa, before you hang up, it's not about the Beatles, it's about Peter Sellers. And she said, "Can you wait a minute?" She put me on hold. This is a long-distance phone call when it was expensive. I was waiting 5 minutes. She went to get him. All of a sudden, I heard on the phone, "Hello, this is Sir George Martin." And I said, I was kind of shocked. And I said, "I want to interview you." And he said, "Yes, my manager just told me it's about Peter Sellers." He said, "I would love to do the interview." I fixed up the time with him. He gave me his home phone number. His wife answered the phone when I called.
Oh, Lord.
And he said, "How long?" I said, maybe 15, 20 minutes. We spoke for 3 hours.
It happens. It happens. Like my most recent podcast wasn't supposed to be very long, but it just went on and on. I had to cut him off in a very polite way, as I have to do now. Wow. Thanks for these 10 points. Much appreciated, Keith. And
if somebody wants them,
I'm going to put them online.
Put them in touch with me, and make some. I quickly summarize it from the PDF that I wrote, so fix the errors that are in it.
I will, and I'm going to put it on our website as well, so people can take a look. And thanks a lot. And this is another end of Fantastic Formosa. Have a great one, folks. Bye-bye.